Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about Stoicism. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, what is that, and why do we need to think about that, right? That is a thinker, and that's why we're here, so we can think about this. And luckily for me, I have Benny here who's going to help us really think about this in a whole new light. So, with that being said, thank you so much, Benny, for coming on to my show, sharing your time, your perspective and so much more. I can't wait to so let's just dive right in. You know what I mean? Let's just dive right in. What does Stoicism makes you think about?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited about being here and talking about this topic, which means a lot to me. And for me, when I think about Stoicism, I think about a philosophy of life, right? A way to live better and to find a way to pretty much the goal of Stoicism is to live more peaceful and calm. And there are techniques to different ways of doing it, and we can look into that. But that's the first thing that I really think about when I think about Stoicism. And off the bat as well, like I'm not here to turn people into Stoics, but I would love to have people think more about their philosophy of life. Like, what do they expect from success or happiness? How do they define that? Just to start thinking more about those really big important topics like purpose and all of that stuff. So that's what I think about when I hear Stoicism.
I love that. I love that understanding because if you really think about it, our philosophy really makes a big impact on how we see life. And if you want a peaceful, joyful, calm life, well, you got to ask yourself those big questions. What does it mean to me? Because life is very subjective. You can't continue to go on life believing accomplishments or successes by fill in the blank. You know what I mean? And what they say. It's about what you believe inside. So I think that is something that we all really need to start thinking about deeper. So, Benny, how did this fall into your life? Like, when did you realize, like, wow, I really need to dive deeper into this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting story, and for me, that really started. Well, usually when you ask people this question, like, "Oh, when did you start with Stoicism or philosophy of life?" It's usually when things happen in their life that aren't really the way they had planned, right? So things
Yeah.
kind of go bad. For me, it was, when my marriage started to go downhill, ended up in divorce, and had some physical injuries and some other obstacles in my life. So I needed some kind of guide, right? So a lot of people they delve into the self-help books, and I started reading as well. A close friend of mine who was a avid reader, he started giving me some titles, more science fiction and the classics. But we slowly started to work into philosophy, and that's where I met the Stoics in this book called The Introduction into Existentialism. I diagnosed myself with an existential crisis, and that's where I saw the Stoics, and they really spoke to me. Right, that's why I say, like, I really encourage people to look for their message, their way of, the tone of voice or the words that the philosophy or a certain way of living speaks to them. And that's what the Stoics did to me. They used the right words. They really had a pragmatic, practical outlook of how to use this philosophy and how to really make it so that you can live better. For example, when dealing with frustration or anger, or in my case, when I was feeling sad about myself, I was like, oh, look at me, I'm the victim. Why does this happen to me? The Stoics, well, why not? This happens to so many people, and you have a choice of how to deal with it. So those were the kind of I always call it the verbal slap in the face that I needed, and to really start thinking about what did I want to do. Because usually after a loss like that, when you go through a divorce, you have to really realign or rethink the future, right? So that's what really happened to me. And I started to really look at the concepts, at the way that I wanted to shape my life, and how, to use the values and principles that I think are important.
Yeah, I think that is so valid because once we start to reflect on that and have that reality check, like you said, like a slap in the face, like we have to get to that point, you know what I mean, where we have to have that self-awareness and have that accountability that your actions matter and it affects your life. You know what I mean? Like one thing I heard before was somebody says you won't make changes unless you're so frustrated or you're just completely done with the way that your life is. You have to have anger, you have to have hate, you have to have some type of passion that makes you cut off what you no longer want in your life anymore. And sometimes it has to go to that extremes for some people. And I liked how you said as well, like you went through everything that you went through, but you were still in this stagnant mindset, you know what I mean? And your friends gave you little by little books to start getting you into that idea of philosophy, by starting by nonfiction and then working your way through to actual fiction. And I think people don't realize that sometimes going in that direction really opens your mind. You know what I mean? Opens your perspective of the possibilities that we just are not aware that are out there. You know what I mean? Because we are only aware of what we were taught growing up and the environment and the community that we were taught growing up. So people have very little perspective on life and how to handle those big dramatic changes like divorce and needing to figure out how you're going to live your life and how to live your life without somebody that you're so used to always being there. You know what I mean? So it's just these are things that people really need to think about. And I think having that philosophy in your life or just having a grand philosophy that you stand by is a great reminder to keep putting you on check. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. And it helps you also learn more about yourself. That's the foundational
Yeah.
thing about building
Yeah.
a philosophy of life. And there's Socrates, right, who was the big shot, the founder of philosophy, if you will. And he really keened on this maxim that was mentioned in the temple of an Apollo in Delphi that said, "Know thyself." And that's
Yeah.
where it all starts. And for a lot of people, that those are scary things to go into, to discover yourself, to ask those difficult questions,
Yeah.
to say like, "Oh, I'm getting angry about this. Why am I getting angry? What does this
Yeah.
mean to me?" Because if you're angry, usually you are projecting something towards other things, right? I'm
Mhm.
angry because they're doing something wrong or because something is happening to me that shouldn't be the case. Instead of turning it around, it's like, why does this affect me so much? And
Yeah.
that is the scary part of undergoing a journey like this, and because you uncover things about yourself that you might not really want to know, that you want to keep hidden. But if you want
Yeah.
to live that peaceful life, and if you really want to become that complete individual, you're gonna have to delve deep, right? You're gonna have to open that cupboard, and you're gonna have to turn on the light on all those things that you try to hide. And that's really what we are trying to do when we talk about creating a philosophy of life,
Yeah.
is going on that journey, going on that discovery, and having the courage to do so because you know that it's the right thing to do. Otherwise, it's like building a house on little wooden sticks. If you don't really solidify the foundation, it's going to crumble.
Yeah.
And if you make the
Absolutely.
foundation strong enough, you'll have the confidence, you have the inner strength, the resilience to deal with whatever comes at you. And then you will have a very long lasting sense of happiness or joy because you also know how to define that for you properly.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think those are also more great points because we really need to start thinking about that. How does it really affect our lives? Where is my peace? And owning up to our own toxic selves. You know what I mean? We have parts of us that are good, but we also have parts of us that may be toxic. And it may be toxic to other people that we don't realize. You know what I mean? People love to talk about, oh, you're just toxic for me. Oh, that's just toxic energy. Oh, la la la. But it's like, hold on, wait a minute. Let's flip the mirror. So, you know what I mean? Let's put it on ourselves and really reflect on what areas we are toxic. You know what I mean? Because I think it goes also down to that victim mindset. You know what I mean? You got to break away from that, expose it, and really shine a light, like you said, on everything. Open the closet door, let all those moths and butterflies out, right? Spring cleaning in our minds. That's most definitely what we need to do because it helps us handle situations in a different way that in the past we wouldn't handle that. And that right there, that's growth. That right there, that philosophy, that inner peace, that's the words that you choose to believe are true, that are true to you now, are going to make a tremendous effect in your life where people are going to be like, different with Benny. What's going on with him? What is he doing? Is he drinking less coffee? What's happening? You know what I mean? Like they think it's on the simple terms, but when you go deeper within yourself and start going through, you realize one, you're not as damaged. And two, a lot of people have similar problems. And three, you just need to cope with it differently. You know what I mean? Like everybody has problems, traumas, it's bound for us all. But it's like how you respond to that, how you receive it, how you embrace it really makes a big difference in our lives. So I'm curious, like, what is your medicine? Like, how do you get Benny back to himself and find your peace again? What is your medicine?
That's an interesting one. And one of the things that I do in moments when you kind of fluster, where you don't really know what to do, uh, sometimes doing less or doing nothing is the best way to go, right?
Yeah.
Just taking a little step back, just reflecting a little bit about where you are, because we always feel this drive to create, to do things, to keep moving forward. But sometimes the best thing is you just kind of take a step back and look around, because as you
Yeah.
mentioned, that mirror, right? I think that that's one of the most important concepts that we can use when looking at ourselves. But the world and everybody around us is that mirror. So if we are frustrated with
Yeah.
ourselves, which I often get as well, although less, less and less, that's really nice way of, a nice result of what happened when I started applying this. But when you start looking at things around you and just say, okay, let me just take a step back instead of keep pushing forward, but really look at what's happening and ask yourself the question, why do I want to move this direction? Or what does this really mean to me? What do my values and principles say? And then we have the Stoics, they really lean on virtue, which is wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, well, four of the cardinal virtues, right? So then you can start to use those and let them guide you in those moments. What is the wise
Yeah.
thing to do? Is it just, or maybe I need to show some courage to go through this, and maybe I need to temper it down and live a little bit more moderate. So those are the things that really help me to get through it. And then the last part is to really listen to myself. Once you start to calm down and once you start to take that pause, you can listen to what your instincts tell you, what your feelings tell you, what your mind tells you, and
Yeah.
that will help you to move into a better direction that fits you. Because we are often driven by external forces, right? Our family, our careers, the opinions that we think others have of us, or what we need to go
Yes.
do, and that often drives us in a certain direction. And that's where a lot of people who are, burnt out or who are stressed or anxiety, because
Yep.
they are following a path that isn't really them. So if we can
Yeah.
slow down, start to really listen to what we value and think is important, then we can help us, that can help us go in those directions. So that's something that really helped me, just like to take a pause, to just take a deep breath. Even if you just get
Yes.
frustrated or angry, just take a deep breath and,
Yep.
and look around you. And it's difficult, right? That's one of the
It is.
things with self-help, where people want that instant fix, but this is going to take time. This is going to take some time, and to find your own, as you said, to find your own medicine, that is really important. Find the thing that really works for you.
Yeah, exactly. Because like people don't realize, like sometimes when you actually go to the pharmaceuticals, they have to adjust the medicine for you specifically. So if you think about it in that form, then you can realize like I have to do what works for me specifically. I have to take into account my daily schedule. I have to take into account who I have to take care of, who I have to interact with, what my daily time is, my fine everything. You know what I mean? And when you have that moment to just pause. I think it's so powerful when we just pause and we just consider everything and just have like a 360 perspective, then we can really take into account, those virtues and have that moment to reflect, like, okay, and ask yourself, what season are you in? You know what I mean? Is this your season to be selfish? Is this your season to be submissive? Is this your season to learn? Is this your season to teach? Is this your season to be selfless? You know what I mean? Everybody has their season, and you have to recognize that as well. And I think that is something that people forget about. You know what I mean? And when we look into somebody else's life and they're doing something that we may not do, we got to remember they're in a different season. So if their season is to call to be submissive right now, allow them to have that, respect that. And if their season is to be selfless, then allow them to have that as well. And I think when we have that consideration for others, then we will also remember to have that consideration for ourselves. And when we have that pause, oh my goodness, it makes such a big difference. And I'm so sad because time is catching up to us. And I feel like we can continue to talk on and on about so many things because it's like an umbrella. You know what I mean? So many different connections can come from it. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting topic. So I understand why you and your buddies made a whole podcast about it because it's like what it's endless. You know what I mean? You could go in so many different directions. So it is really interesting. So I guess to start wrapping up the show, what can be some lasting words of wisdom that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
Yeah, and you mentioned a few things there as well, like about responsibility, right? Taking that responsibility for your own actions. I think that that's a really strong indicator of how well you are going to do this, and also how to look differently at your own life. And one of the things that I also think is important to become an observer, because that'll help in so many different ways. It help you look differently at life, but also different at yourself. It'll give you that kind of distance between what's happening and how you feel and think about it, and then make sure that you then react in the best way possible. Instead of out of those emotions and feelings, you can observe them, you can analyze them, and you can make sure that you not necessarily move out of them, or not necessarily act out of them, but just make sure that you use the Stoics say reason and logic to act out of it. And those are the things that can really help us along in our quest to find more peace and calm, because that's at the end of the day, if you ask a lot of people, and I love to travel, I'm currently in Spain in a camper van, as you can see, and living a kind of a minimalistic lifestyle, which suits me. But once you start to travel, you see that people all over the world really want the same thing. They want peace, they want safety, they want to have a good life for the people around them, and that doesn't require a lot. You don't really need a lot, at least not as much as we think that we need. And that's one of the things that we could really start to look into, like what are our values and principles, but also what are my needs? What do I really need? And how can I start getting rid of the superfluous things that cause me anxiety, right? The Stoics don't say like, don't buy stuff or don't have those things, but look at what they really mean to you. And if they cause you distress, then maybe it's better to get rid of those things. So find the things that really matter to you and work from there to once you start knowing yourself, once you start knowing what is important to yourself, to you, then you can start working to finding that peace and balance, which will really help you live a better life.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's a very great point about traveling and gaining a perspective because you're right. Because every time I used to travel, I don't travel anymore. That's not my season right now, but before when I used to travel a lot, that was one thing I loved is just gaining a new perspective because you would see that no matter where you go all around the world, no matter where you go, they all want love, good food, and safety. You know what I mean? And when you have safety and good food and love, goodness gracious, that right there at that moment, it's like nothing else really matters. Nothing else really matters. You know what I mean? And I think people forget about that. It's that when you put yourself in that perspective and you clear yourself out of the nonsense and the hustle bustle of the way that society portrays living should be or life should be, you know what I mean? You really get a different value on what life means to you personally, you know, and you start to make those changes in your life to start embodying it where you don't have to go to drastic measures to seek it out. You could just wake up and already be in your peace, you know what I mean? Wake up and already be in your safety and in your love. And I don't think people recognize that, you know, and I think that is something that is truly something that people really need to think about. Goodness, Benny. I'm I love this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. And if, ladies and gentlemen, you guys want to know more and you just want to just continue on this thought about what it means to me about this philosophy, go check him out. Go check out his podcast with him and his buddies. They have great conversations so that you can keep on thinking. I have his website on mine under his photo. Just bloop right there. Just click right there under. And so that you can check it out and you can continue on thinking, right? Because that's the point to think about it. So with that being said, bye.